All right. Well, we're at 5 after, Justin. So the floor is yours.
Cool. Okay, let's get started. And you said I have a full 90 minutes, Frank?
Yeah, you can have 90 minutes.
All right, awesome. Usually these go probably about 60. So, I'd say with that in mind, like throughout the session, like if anyone has a question, maybe we can use the raise hand feature. And then throughout the demo, like we can come off because we'll have plenty of time. But since we do have some extra time, I thought it might be fun to kind of go start out just a little bit about the company. So my name is Justin. I'm the founder here at PatchMyPC. For those of you that don't know what we do, we are a third-party application management feature that integrates into Config Manager and Intune. So from a company perspective, just quick overview, founded in 2011. The company originally started doing a free home updater that people could use on their personal PCs. That's still very popular and used by millions of people today. And then in 2013, we kind of started creating this update catalog that you could use to publish third-party products into WSUS using System Center Update Publisher. So we are basically providing the metadata where people wouldn't have to go and manually build products into their environment for patching existing applications. Kind of started off slow, right? So I mean, where we were integrating into SCUP, it was a pretty manual process. So not quite as great as like a fully automated experience. When things started picking up in 2018, that's where we really had the automation come into play. So we had our own tool set that we developed where these third-party updates could automatically publish into WSUS and Config Manager. So from start to finish, you wouldn't have to go and manually do importing into tools like SCUP. And then kind of more recently, we came out with an application feature. So April 2019, about a year after the automation piece, we came out with this new feature where we can actually package applications within Config Manager as well. So not only are we doing the third-party updates for existing computers that already have apps, but we can actually create your app repository that you could then use in task sequences, collection deployments, and things like that. And then later on in 2019, we came out with Intune Integration. 2020, early 2020, we came out with Intune Integration where we could create apps and build your repository in Intune as well. And then more recently, we came out with a patching feature in Intune. So within this demo, we're going to just go through, show you exactly what it looks like to set up the product, and then hopefully take any questions throughout that. And I guess just for context, do we have anyone on our team here as well? Just if anyone questions come up or anyone wants to chime in.
Yeah, Cody Mathis here. Looks like Andrew's here too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so feel free to chime in at any time. Looks like we have plenty of time. So if you guys have any thoughts, like as we're going through the setup, totally cool. And once again, any questions, raise hand and we can answer those just right over voice as well. So first thing that we're going to do is if you are interested, if this demo looks good and you want to try this out, probably first step, we do have a full trial that you can go download, and that's not limited at all. So that will give you features to the entire catalog as well as feature set where you can go and you can set this up and see exactly how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. So over on the download page, we're just going to grab our publisher. So this is the tool that's going to automate everything. It's only a couple of megabytes and it would get installed on your software update point if you're using Configuration Manager. Now, if you're a cloud-only shop only using Intune, this could run on any typical Windows VM. So Windows 10, it doesn't really matter, it could run there as well. Okay, go ahead and launch that. Okay, awesome. So first thing that you're going to get when you come into the tool, this is going to be the UI that opens. So this is going to be where you can determine which products that you want to publish, as well as which applications that you want to create, both in Config Manager or Intune. So for example, if we take a quick look at our lab, we can see that we don't have, really anything going on today. So for example, if we go look at our software updates, we don't have any third-party updates, and we also don't have any applications within Config Manager. So we're going to go start to finish and show you exactly what that looks like. Okay, so first thing, if you do want to use the updates piece, we do have a requirement for a code signing cert. Do you want to maybe cover that requirement a little bit, Cody?
sure. So this really is a requirement for WSUS in general when it comes to third-party updates. There's a few ways for it to be managed. We do offer a way to manage it with our tool. You can import your own PFX, your own PKI generated code signing cert. You're also welcome to use the generate self-signed, and we've got some options within there as well. And then if you already have a code signing certificate, say you've already done third-party updates with SCCM or you have a different product, we're going to pick that same cert up. So it's just ultimately used to code sign third-party updates. Again, that's a requirement of WSUS. It kind of creates that layer of trust where, with the right config, your clients know that this is trusted content. Typically, Microsoft signs the updates. In a third-party scenario, you sign them.
Cool. So what we're going to use in this scenario is actually show you how you can do that within Config Manager. So if you come into your software update point, and this is a feature that's been out since Config Manager current branch 1806, we can actually enable the feature to automatically manage the certificate. So we're going to enable third-party updates on the software update point properties. And then this is the big piece. We want to allow Config Manager to manage our WSUS signing cert. So what that actually means is when you come into your software update point and look at all software updates, when we trigger a synchronization after we enable that setting, what's going to happen is Config Manager is going to go talk to WSUS and say, hey, I don't see any certificate in place today. So if we actually take a look at the wsyncmanager.log, we'll actually see where Config Manager makes the certificate. So for example, we can see it didn't detect any signing certificate. So then it said, I couldn't find it. Let me go ahead and generate a new one. So what that basically means is if we close out of our tool and we reopen it, we can just use that cert that was automatically created for us. So we can come in here and we can see it's now detected, and this was generated from Config Manager. Now, a nice piece about this is, if we come back into our software update point and look at the third-party updates, we can see that that certificate is automatically detected that it created. Now, the big thing that's pretty helpful in this scenario is if you go to your client settings, and as long as third-party updates are enabled here, your clients will automatically get that certificate using client policy. Oh, there we go. So as long as this is enabled, they're going to automatically get that directly from your site, and you don't have to worry about creating GPOs to distribute that, for example. Okay, so let's jump back in. All right, so kind of the two pieces that we're going to start out with here are we have two big pieces with Config Manager. We have updates. So that's going to be this tab right here. So that's going to have updates auto-publish into Config Manager. I guess I should actually put probably the arrow the other way. So this tool is going to push updates down into Config Manager. And then we also have our application piece. So that's going to be what packages brand new applications for you, where you don't have to worry about manually creating those, and we can also keep those up to date. So probably the first thing that we see new customers coming into is actually trying to determine which products they actually want to enable, right? Because I mean, there is a pretty large list of apps here, and that's constantly growing as well. So for example, if we go and we take a look at our supported products page, which you can get to right from this menu over here, you can see a list of all the apps that we support today. You can come in here and you can search for apps as well. But a big piece to this is that that list is constantly growing, right? So if you go to ideas.patchmypc.com, that's our user voice, where if we don't have an app that you want as a company, our customers come in here and they submit feedback for that. And from here, you can also get to the public roadmap as well. And that's going to be where you can see products that have recently shipped. It looks like this is a little bit small, but pretty much anything in the dark blue are going to be new applications that we've added each month. So last year, for example, we added 50 new products based on customer feedback. So the first step, you can come in here and you can actually scan against your existing Config Manager database. Since you wrote the feature, Cody, any thoughts on kind of what we're looking at here?
Sure. So with this, we're just using hardware inventory data, so your add remove programs data, and we normalize the products that we support, the names, in order to be able to scan the database. So we're trying to provide a rough count of instances of that software in your environment. So we've got a count of the the types of software. We got 303 apps we found, and then on the right, the count of instances. And then, we're providing some export options. There's also some auto publishing that can happen up top there. So we see some customers implement this where they want to automatically select for publishing applications if they happen to be found. So maybe you have a threshold that the business decides on. Once it finds it on 50 devices, I'd like to automatically enable it so it starts being patched. And one thing we do commonly hear from customers with the data that's presented is like MSI versus exit comparisons. You'll see duplicates. And we are just trying to provide a high-level overview. The updates themselves kind of handle those fine discrepancies like installer type.
Yeah, awesome. So for this example, just for demonstration's sake, like if we wanted to, say you had a bunch of products and you just wanted to go enable everything based on detection, you can do that in this scan wizard. But just for the demo, we'll only do a couple here. So we'll get started by first enabling some of the customizations that we can apply within our product. So for example, you can right click at the all products level and get custom options that you can apply for how updates and apps install. You can also do this at the individual product level as well if you wanted to be more specific. But just as an example, let's say that we wanted to automatically close any applications that are in use prior to an update being installed. We could simply right click and that setting will be applied and it would auto close. You can also skip if it is in use. So if an app is in use, say Google Chrome is running by a user and you didn't want to force close it, you could have it so it skips and tries the update during the next scan cycle. Now, one feature that we're actively coding, which has been a pretty popular request, is to give interactive notifications to users that are running an app that they need to close it in order for the update to apply. So we're currently working on that and things are looking pretty good. So we're hoping to have that out sometime soon as well. Some additional customizations, we can delete shortcuts. So maybe you don't want an application to put a public desktop icon for all users. You can have it automatically delete that. We can also delete the self-updater feature. So if you wanted to control this from Config Manager, you could do that and set that kind of natively for all products. And then the last option, this one's actually quite helpful for troubleshooting, is we can actually enable logging. So what that means is I'm going to go out and I'm going to paste in a UNC path where I want any failed logs to go. So what that means is, let's say, for example, you have an installation that's running and it gives you a bad exit code. So an update fails for, say, Google Chrome, and let's say it's a generic 1603 exit code, like a fatal installation. We can actually automatically append a logging command line to that so that we could have a actual idea of why it failed rather than just getting something generic. And we can even copy those to remote shares if you wanted to. So super helpful for troubleshooting if you ever did have an issue. Okay, but for the demo, we're going to enable a couple products. I'm going to enable Google Chrome 64-bit. Now, once we get to the product level, there are a few additional customizations that we can apply. So one that we have at the individual product that we don't have at all products is you can add your own custom pre or post script. So if you did want to have like some kind of environment specific configuration, you would be able to do that. You can also modify command lines. And if it's an MSI, you can add a transform file as well. For this example, what I'm going to do is right click. And for the Google Chrome update, I'm going to say I want to run a post action. And it's just the PowerShell script I'm going to use in this example. And what this does, it just sets a registry value. So this is going to say, I want to set Google Chrome homepage for all users to patchmypc.com. And that's just an example of where if you did want to have something very specific, you could really customize these using pre or post scripts. Okay, last option here, we're going to go ahead and enable Google Chrome, Java 8 32-bit. And we can see that also has those right-click options applied that we did at the global level as well. So we'll apply that. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're going to jump over to the Config Manager apps. And one thing to note about this setup, this is really going to be a one-time thing. So once you get all the products that you want to auto-publish, you're going to have a sync schedule, and that's going to automatically keep any new updates that come out automatically publishing. All right, so jumping over into the Config Manager app. So this is where we're going to automatically populate, this applications node of the console using our product. So it's pretty basic. The only really thing that you have to do is tell us where your provider is. So that's how we know how to talk to Config Manager. And then lastly, like, where do you want to actually save the content? So when we go out and download, the different installers, where do you want to save them? So this is the source folder using a UNC, and this is going to be where the content is for our deployment types that we auto create for you. There are a couple of customizations that you can apply. So for example, you can choose whether or not you want the checkbox for the application to allow it to run in task sequence, as well as just a variety of other options. One of the ones that we're going to set at the global application level is we're going to say any applications that we're creating, let's add them to the subfolder patch my PC within the applications node. So that's just corresponding to this guy right here. So any app that get created will automatically go into that folder. And then the last one is, how do you want updates to occur for your actual based applications? So by default, we do update apps in place. So that means that, let's say Google Chrome 87 came out and version 88 came out a week later. If you left the default behavior, we would revise the existing application for Chrome, and then we would update the content files and detection method. And the benefit to that is that you're always deploying the latest version of Chrome, right? So if you had that app in a task sequence, you would always be having the updated version get installed. Now, if you did want to have more change control, you can also choose to create a new app each time that update comes out. So that way you could revert back, or maybe you have testing that you have to do first. And then lastly, you can choose to automatically distribute the apps to a DP group. So outside of that, that's pretty much the options. Now, the process is going to be very similar, where you get the list of apps you want to enable, and you can choose specifically what you want for an app. Now, in this instance, I'm actually going to duplicate what I did in the Updates tab just by clicking Copy. And I can see that by doing that, I have Google Chrome enabled for an app as well, and it has all the same right-click options that I had for updates too. So for example, we can see that that PostScript that's going to set the homepage got applied for the applications as well. So I didn't have to do that in both of our nodes here. So both updates and both apps are here as well. And then the other one, what I'm going to do is enable 7-zip as an app. So here we go, 7-zip MSI. Now, at the application level, we do have quite a few additional features that aren't really specific to updates. So for example, we can see that these are all kind of specific to the applications within SCCM, right? So let's say for 7-zip, I want to be more specific, and I want to move that to a subfolder patch my PC. That's an example of a customization. We can also do things like manage categories. So let's say that you wanted to apply 7-zip to a custom category. It looks like I don't have one now, but let's say, I wanted to create a new category. And let's call it, well, I'll just call it 7-zip, but this would probably be something specific like archivers or something like that. We can automatically assign it. So when that app gets created, you can have categories within Software Center where your users could get, pretty good filters and things like that. And then outside of that, I think that's some of the big ones here. So that looks good. I'm going to apply these settings. And what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and start the sync just to get the config manager piece for updates and apps going. And then what we'll do, we'll look at our alerting options as well. So the alerting, the way that this works is whenever anything new happens in your environment, since once you set this up the first time, you really don't need to come back into it. This is going to be how you get alerted whenever any new updates or apps are actually created within your environment. So we have both email alerts as well as Teams alerts where you can get those notifications. So if I go ahead and open the log real quick, what we'll see is in the background, we've already started to create these updates and apps. So we'll let that run a minute, and then we'll jump into the Intune piece while that's running. So same kind of concept with Microsoft Intune, where we can automatically populate your repository for apps and both updates as well. So while that's running, let's just jump in, and we'll go ahead and enable kind of those same apps for Intune as well. So the only real configuration that we have for Microsoft Intune is we do need to create an app registration. Do you want to kind of run through why we need that, Cody?
Yeah, sure. So we're interacting with the Microsoft Graph API to do all of the interactions with Intune. So we're making calls to talk to Intune to get app information, create apps, and make all these modifications. And how we do that is with an Azure app registration and with an application secret. So you provide this information that you've pre-created in the portal. So it looks like he's going to pull up the app registration. And then on this app registration, you can actually set up the specific API permissions that are required, which we provide some documentation on. And then once that's configured and you set it up, we now have the permission to go and make all these changes and queries within Graph and your tenant.
Awesome. So that's really the only prereqs there is just a quick registration that we make. And then outside of that, it's a very similar process where we just choose which third-party apps or updates that we want to start publishing into Microsoft Intune. So what I'm going to do, go ahead and choose duplicate again. And what that's going to do, that's going to get me Google Chrome. And it's going to enable the same exact things that we had in Config Manager updates and apps as well. Now, one thing to note, these are not dependent on each other. So, if you're using co-management where you have devices both being managed on-prem by Config Manager, as well as maybe some in Intune, there very likely could be a scenario where you're using all 4 of these features, just like we're doing in this demo. But if you were just Config Manager shop or just an Intune shop, basically, just these 2 or these 2 would probably be the ones that you configure. So it just depends on your configuration. But all the automation of the publishing would be done in the same tool, so that if you are using both, like you can very easily duplicate those same options to get those configurations. So that looks good for the apps. I went ahead and just duplicated the same exact ones we have. And then for the Intune updates, let me just enable 7-zip. So that's the only one we have to demo there. So 7-zip, 64-bit MSI, and I'll choose apply. Now, one thing that you might have noticed, since we did have a synchronization running, we can actually see that we have notifications coming through Microsoft Teams because we enabled that webhook. So for example, we can see that we have an update published for Google Chrome. We also get details like the release notes, so we can jump out and we can get specific information about that update that was actually being published in real time. So we can see, that type of details. We can see whether it was a critical severity as well as classification level. And we do also link out to any CVEs that we have. So if there were any CVEs with that update, you can actually go and link directly out to the vulnerability database where you can see that right from a Teams notification, for example. So it looks like we just finished our synchronization for the updates and the apps in Config Manager. So let me just run one more sync now that we've enabled some Intune pieces. But this synchronization is really going to be where all the automation occurs. So, let's say a new version of Java comes out tomorrow. That's going to be where it automatically publishes and starts showing up for you. And you don't really ever have to come back into this tool. Now, the only thing I will mention that I did miss is we do have an option where you can actually import CVEs. So if we were to go look at our desktop, we can see that we have this CVE document. It's just the CSV file. It just contains a list of just CVEs, really. This could be from something like a Qualys that you may get. And if your security team says, hey, I want to know, are these CVEs available for these third-party updates? So you can simply import that list and then just click process. And this will actually go and it will query the updates that all the updates we've ever published into Config Manager/WSUS, and it will also query our catalog for what's available. So if I were to group this by product, we can see that we have 17 CVEs that are available that are not yet published, and we can also see which ones are not available. So were there any security, CVEs that we don't know about? And you can also import one-offs from here as well. But for this case, I think that should be good for our CVEs. And I'll go ahead and close out of the tool. Now, if we jump back over here, we should see these updates are already appearing in Config Manager for our third-party updates. So for example, we can see both that Chrome and Java update. The reason they're showing up so quickly is we had the option to automatically sync our software update point whenever any new updates become available. So we can see that these are already appearing, and same thing for the config manager apps. We can see they are, oh, here we go. I must not have saved that folder. But once the updates appear, like your day-to-day workload is going to be exactly the same. So for example, for your updates, you're going to be using all the existing features of config manager. So whether that's ADRs or searches, depending on how you deploy updates, you can use the same exact functionality. And it also uses the same exact infrastructure, like your distribution points, your software update groups, as well as your client. There's nothing additional that you need for that. Okay, so here we go. We can see that for our ADR that we had pre-configured, basically we're just saying, hey, show me all updates from Patch My PC, and let's deploy that. So when this ran, we had 3 different groups that we had for our testing collections. So we have our pilot for 1 day, we have a broad pilot for 3, and then we have a production for 7 days. So the same way that you could kind of stage out those Microsoft updates, you can do for us as well. Okay, so we come over here. So we can see that ADR actually already kicked off, and those updates have already been deployed. We can even see that we're getting some compliance data back here as well. Okay, and then over on the application piece, so if we were to look at some of these apps that were auto-created, look at Google Chrome, Software Center, you can see that we also fill out the metadata. So things like applications, icons, keywords would all be automatically populated. And then if we look at that 7-zip one, we can see that's in that subfolder that we define using that right click. Let's close that down. And the only thing I'm going to do before we jump over to the client side is I'm going to go ahead and deploy those applications to all my users. So this is being a bit slow. So I'm going to just run a PowerShell script, and what that's going to do is those 3 applications that we created, it's simply creating an available deployment to all users. Any questions before we jump over to client side on anything so far? Nope. Okay, cool. So while the synchronization is running, we can also look on the Intune side of things as well. So if I were to refresh this, we should see that we already have our applications getting created for both Chrome, Java, and our update for 7-zip. Do you want to do maybe a quick overview, Cody, of the difference between the Intune application feature and the Intune update feature that we're using here?
Sure. So when we wanted to introduce the updates feature into Intune, we realized we had to kind of recreate the concept of applicability like WSUS has, like updates have. And what we're doing is using requirements on the Win32 apps on these Intune applications. So for our applications themselves, like we're looking at here with Google Chrome, we have a script that we use for detection. It tells us if the app successfully installed. If we look at the update, we have a requirement script as well. And the requirement script does a check for whether or not a older version of the application is found. So if this update, this Win32 app, which we label as an update, ran on a device that didn't have any version of 7-zip installed, it wouldn't be applicable, and it wouldn't even show up, or it wouldn't apply to the device. So it kind of recreates that update experience like we're familiar with in WSUS, where you don't have to target a device knowing whether or not it has the software. You can let the client kind of determine that.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Now, one thing I did do is I actually forgot to assign these. Now, although the updates and apps are showing in Microsoft Intune, we can see that they're not actually assigned. So one feature that we do have is a right-click option within both our Intune apps and updates is that we can actually manage assignments directly into Intune. So for example, let's say for all the apps that we're creating, let's just say we wanted to make them available to all users where they could install it. We could simply right-click all products and choose to assign them to all users. You can do both available, required, or uninstall. You can also choose things like, if it was a required app, you can choose like when you want the deadline to be and how you want to offset that as well. One of the newer features that we actually just implemented was the ability to add enrollment status pages. So I don't think I actually have any on the Intune side, but if you did use an enrollment status page for autopilot, you can directly assign applications from our publisher where they would automatically be created within your ESB profile so that any new machines coming in through autopilot could automatically get those as well. So I did go ahead and right click and assign all my apps to all users. And I'm also going to do the same for my updates. But for the updates, I'm going to make this a required deployment. And then like Cody was mentioning, we're going to let the applicability for the requirement rule handle whether or not it needs to apply. And if the update isn't needed, it would simply show not applicable, similar to the way it works in Config Manager. So let me go ahead and run a sync just because I did manage those assignments. And what we'll actually notice here in a second is we can see that we're adding those new assignments. So if I refresh Intune now, see, it might just take a second. Okay, we can see that we're starting to get those assignments showing up for all our apps. So in a single right-click option, we could have hundreds of applications created, but you could then deploy them just right-clicking all products, and maybe you want to show them in company portal. You could do that in a single action here using that feature. So what we'll do next, we'll jump over to client side. So first thing, we're going to look at our client that is a config manager client. So we can see that this machine, it does have some outdated apps installed. So let's take a quick look. We can see that we have Google Chrome version 77. We can see that we have Java 8 update 221. And then we can see that we're getting the later version of Chrome 84 and then Java 8 261. And these are showing available and a deadline of tomorrow because that's how our automatic deployment rule was set up. You could, of course, use deadlines. You can make this not visible. Totally up to you with how you want to control this. Now, one thing that we will note, if you remember, we did enable that option for a postscript, and we also enabled the option to delete the shortcut. So if we were to open Chrome, we can see nothing special, just google.com is the standard homepage. So let me go ahead and kick off that install. Okay. Now, since we also enabled that right-click option for logging, we can actually see that we have the verbose MSI log for Google Chrome. So let's say, for example, Chrome ever failed, you could actually go look at the vendor's installer log and understand what specific action during the install did it fell on. Was it unable to set a registry value? Could it not overwrite files? And this can be super helpful for troubleshooting if you ever did have any issues. So we can also see that public desktop icon just got deleted. And then if we open up Google Chrome, based on the post action script, we can see it set the home page for all users over to patchmypc.com. So that's going to be that custom post action script that we set that allowed that flexibility to happen. Now, within the patchmypc script runner log that's along with your CCM logs with everything else, you can actually see all those customizations that took place as well. So for example, we can see that that post-action PowerShell script ran. We can also see things like disabling updates and also deleting that public desktop shortcut. Go, let's jump back over. Same thing with Java, we'll kick that off. And we did have the option for Java to automatically close. So when we kick this install off, what we'll notice here in a second is it's going to automatically close the control panel app for Java because it detected that was a conflicting process. Any questions? I just saw one in the chat. Anything that anyone wants to come off on mute while we're waiting for this to install?
It was praise for patchmypc and how well everything works.
Is that Tim Mills? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I was on a call with Tim yesterday, I believe. Cool. Curious, did anybody attend the Ask Us Anything session the other day with us? Doesn't look like anything in the chat. Okay, so for the applications though, same kind of concept here. So we can see that for this machine, we just got our 2 patches applied for Chrome and Java. So if I refresh, we can see we're now at these new versions. But for 7-zip, we don't have that app installed. So I'm going to go ahead and click install, and this is going to install just like any other config manager application. So if we look at the app enforce log, for example, that's about to pop up, we're using the same exact mechanisms that you would see with any other application, right? So I can see my discovery happening. I can see the app enforce that actually triggered the install. We're simply just creating these for you, and you're using all the same processes that you would be accustomed to today for deploying those apps. So now I can see if I were to refresh, we now have 7-zip installed. We had all our icons in Software Center, and we also have uninstall. So say that you want to deploy one of the apps that we create as an uninstall, you can totally do that as well, where you could remove apps based on the deployment type as well. Okay, so I think that that's pretty good from like kind of the config manager piece. So if we were to look back into our console, here in the next couple minutes, we're going to see our compliance statistics start to jump up for those 2 third-party updates as well as the application. So before we start talking about some of the reporting aspects, let me jump over to an Intune client. So let's come over here. So this is simply a Intune client that is connected to the same exact Intune tenant that we just created our applications on. So we can see that application both for Google Chrome as well as for Java, as well as the update for 7-zip. So if we come and we look at our Intune client, from this perspective, we can see that we do have an outdated version of 7-zip, version 18, where our update was version 19, and we can see that we don't have Chrome installed. So what we're going to notice here in Company Portal, just like you're probably accustomed to, like you can see the new apps that are assigned to it. So we'll go ahead and kick off Google Chrome. Well, now, like most things with the cloud, it might take a couple minutes to download this, but let's just see if see what we have going on here. This would be a great time for questions as well while we're waiting for the download to kind of happen. So if anyone does have anything, feel free to unmute.
Will there be any works in the future to be able to manage this not on the server, to be able to make these application changes and everything for a team that works outside of the actual server infrastructure?
For config manager piece, Intune, or both?
No, for the actual Patch My PC publishing.
It may be. So if you're using the updates feature of the config manager piece, the reason that we want that to be on the software update point is so that our WSUS APIs that we call to publish are always the same of the WSUS server we're publishing to. So for example, like we could potentially have the capability to publish remotely, but if there's any conflicts between maybe you're running a newer version of RSAT for WSUS compared to the server, could potentially cause issues. Now, Intune, this can be installed anywhere, so it could be Windows 10 client. We do have a user voice for managing the publisher remotely, so we do know that's a common ask. So some aspects might, so for example, we know that Intune, one big thing that we're probably gonna look at is what would it look like to have like a service that runs rather than the publisher. So we do have some things in mind, but as far as the publisher, it's hard to know, and that's mainly due to conflicts with APIs. But for example, if you were only using the config manager apps feature, since that doesn't require those same matching, this could be installed anywhere remote from the SMS provider, for example. So not sure at the moment. We do know that we get a common request is to have like a remote console, even if it's just to change the settings. But good question. Today, no, but hopefully we'll have a better story soon.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, cool. So from the client side, I do see some logs kicking in here. So what we can see if I refresh add or move programs, we can see that we have 7-zip that updated to version 19. Just like on the config manager piece as well, we do also have some pretty verbose logs to help you troubleshoot things. So for example, the actual log that controls our app and update installation is actually the same exact log. So you can see any of the customizations happening, like home pages, like disabling updates, as well as us calling the vendors install. So for example, here's that update that applied the latest 7-zip. You can see things like command lines, and you can see Chrome deleting shortcuts and things like that. So it looks like that's actually just about complete. We can see 7-zip is already here. So that update applied required in the background. Looks like Chrome might just be finishing up here. And we'll just go ahead and kick off Java as well in the background. There we go. So let's see if it's showing up. So we can at least open it now. It doesn't look like it's detected quite yet, but same kind of concept here. The same post action applied using Microsoft Intune as well. So all those same customizations you can apply regardless of whether you're Intune or Config Manager. Go. So it looks like Java's kicking off. So probably no need to sit here and watch this same kind of concept. We'll just see that install. Now jumping back to the server, we do have a couple of options for reporting. So these reports are actually free regardless of whether you're a customer. So you can go, if you install our publisher, even without a license, you can come in and you can click the report installer. And what we'll do, we'll load in some Ssrs dashboards that you can use to run some compliance dashboards. So if we open up our console, I guess the first thing to mention here is that since our update's published just like a Microsoft update, any of the native reports that you would get within Config Manager, they do work for third-party patches just like Microsoft updates. But if you did want to have a more visual diagram of like dashboards or Power BI, there are some options for that as well. So for example, this is the Power BI dashboard, or I'm sorry, the Ssrs dashboard that we have, where you can come in here. Let's come here, and you can actually get compliance data about your devices, both for third-party updates as well as for Microsoft updates. So I think our lab is pretty compliant for the one that we're looking at here, but you can get trends and you can really get better visuals into what's actually happening in your environment. So for example, if we wanted to look at updates released in the month of February, I could click on that, and then we could actually see which ones are still required, right? So for example, we can see that the Adobe Flash removal tool that we created this month in our lab, we can see that that's now successfully removed Flash on 4 machines. Kind of the same thing for updates. So we can see that we still have TeamViewer required on one of our devices. But since our deadlines happen pretty quick in the lab that we're looking at here, we can see it's really just all compliant numbers. That's why that percentage was so high, because all these third-party patches have already been applied within the lab. Go. And then there's just a variety of other ones. So there's one where you can choose a specific software update group or category and get compliance data. So maybe you want to look at like a Microsoft dashboard, for example, of a software update group for just Microsoft updates. Same kind of thing here. You can, go check out that compliance as well. And then even like third-party software update groups, if you did want to look at that, depending on how you split out your software update groups, you can get pretty specific and get some nice visuals like how you're trending within here. Now, with that said, if you are using any of the community Power BI dashboards, so for example, this one is specific to Config Manager. This is the free one that you can get from Microsoft. Same kind of concept here as well. So any of the third-party updates that you've published will also show up in any of the native dashboards from the community. So, it would show up just like a Microsoft update here because we use that same reporting mechanism. Now, the other interesting one is Microsoft Intune. So that one's a bit challenging because if you go into Intune, you don't really have a lot of good reporting options, right? There's nothing that really shows you the status of everything in bulk. So for example, if you wanted to see how your Chrome did, your Chrome app or your Chrome update, you would actually have to go into the specific app, and that would be how you could check your compliance numbers. But one of the features that we've recently implemented, if you could paste the link in, Cody, for the Power BI dashboard, or Andrew, I'll actually show you how this works, but within our tool, under the Intune apps, we have this feature where we can query all the applications that you have in Microsoft Intune. So in this lab, it's kind of small, but what we can do, we can get data about what are your statistics. So that means, how many of these applications have been installed, how many have failed, how many are pending, and how many are not applicable. And what we can do, we can export all of the apps at once in the data, and we can save that to a CSV file. And then what we have a Power BI template you can download from our website where we can actually load in all your statistics for your updates and your application deployment. And you can actually start to get some details about whether or not your patches, like how many are required, meaning they're not installed yet, or how many are actually compliant. So this is a pretty close feature to where we were trying to get some compliance reporting for third-party updates in Intune because it's just natively not there, right? We don't have the robust database that you would get using the software update model within Configuration Manager. So we have these dashboards available both for your apps as well as your updates in Microsoft Intune. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, hey Justin, this is Elena Henry. I was interested in the SSRS report bundle, and I missed. How can we get a hold of that?
Yeah, good question. So if you go to patchmypc.com, I believe it's /reports. Yep, so /reports will redirect you. This will show exactly how you do the setup. So, walk through in the advanced tab, how you enter your config manager site code and that stuff. And then what will happen, you just click install, and then it will automatically update all the URLs to match the server that you entered so that all of the sub reports work perfectly fine for you. So yeah, it should be pretty quick. For example, if I actually wanted to show it off real quick, we could go over here. We could say I want to run the report installer. Let's say config manager _PR1, I believe would be my site. And then my SQL server is SCCM. And I am running remote. We'll see if this works. My account might not have the upload permissions. Yeah, it looks like that worked fine. So it's going to automatically change the links and then oh no, the upload isn't going to work. I don't think I have upload rights from this demo to the other one. But that's going to be how you can do it. It only takes a couple minutes.
Awesome, thank you.
It does not do reporting for Windows 10 updates in Intune. It would only be the third-party updates that we're creating using the Win32 application model. Yeah, I think that's another feature that's somewhat lacking. It's just the native kind of Microsoft compliance reports within Intune. Cool. Okay, any other questions before maybe you look at some pricing and open it up for anything else? Cool. So as far as pricing goes, like if this looked interesting and you wanted to try it out, we do have pretty upfront pricing here. So we have kind of 3 main subscription levels that most of our customers would use. So Intune, that would be if you're cloud only and you only care about the Intune apps and the Intune updates. So that's $2.5 per device per year. Keep in mind, we do have a minimum kind of price regardless of size. So if you are kind of smaller, we do have kind of this base starting price because we think there's a lot of value regardless of size by not having to manually package all these applications. So we do have that base price. So if you are smaller, just keep that in mind. There could be the $19.99 per year fee if the device count wouldn't reach that. Then over on the config manager piece of things, we have 2 different kind of subscription levels. We have Enterprise and Enterprise Plus. So Enterprise is $1 or $2 per device a year, and then Enterprise Plus is $3.5 per year. And really the key difference there is the Enterprise subscription. That's going to give you access to the updates. So pretty much this tab here, if you only care about updates, that's going to allow you to publish those updates, and that would allow you to update existing machines that have outdated apps. If you wanted to use both the updates and pretty much the app packaging feature, that's going to be where Enterprise Plus comes into play. So if you did want to build your base packages that you could use in your task sequence or collection deployments, that would be the $3.5 per device per year. Now, keep in mind that would also give you Intune access as well. So if you were in co-management, that would include pretty much the entire feature set. So that's kind of what the subscriptions and pricing looks like. Anything I'm missing for anyone on our team that I haven't covered that we typically do on demos? Okay, I don't think so. Yeah, so any other questions? I think I'm pretty much good. So I mean, we have plenty of time for questions. So let's keep any of those coming.
I'll give you one. The Power BI dashboard that you showed, that was connecting to Intune. Do you have Power BI dashboards that you guys have made that are specifically connecting to ConfigMan?
Good question. So the answer is going to be likely soon. Okay. So the one that I demoed for Config Manager was specific to, it's the Power BI dashboard that's already out there from Microsoft you can download. Right. We do have a new hire that we haven't quite announced yet. That is pretty good in Power BI. So I think we probably will spend some Power BI reports specific to Config Manager, both for probably third-party patching, third-party apps that are created through us in Config Man, as well as probably even a Microsoft update dashboard potentially. I don't think I mentioned it to him, the hire yet, but I would say we can probably commit that I think we will be doing something with Power BI for Config Manager, and yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. Other questions? Cool. Yeah, I don't see
No
anything
more
coming in
questions?
chat. Okay. Was I the last session for today?
You are.
Cool.
No
All right.
questions for Justin, guys? Going once, going twice. All right.
Well, 30 minutes back for your day.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Justin. As always,
Yep,
appreciate
thanks.
you coming by and showing everybody everything you guys have to offer. It's a great product. As someone, I forget who it was now, was it Tim? Yeah, as Tim mentioned before, great product, great tool. So give it a look, guys.
Yep, cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
All right, guys. So that is it for today. That concludes this month's session. Be on the lookout for the next meeting. We will probably, in the May-ish timeframe, I'm thinking. I saw that MMS once again got canceled this year, so I'm sure that's a bummer for many of you on the call right now. But we will try to have one of our sessions in that time frame to try to fill in the gap a little bit there. If anybody is interested in speaking at our next session or any future session, don't hesitate to reach out. Contact the Twitter account that I manage at CLESCUG, CLESCUG. If you're not on the meetup site, please join there as well. Meetup.com/CLESCUG, CLESCUG. And that's it. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.